Hey, what is going on YouTube? It's Nile, Scala, and Brian Blevins of the Pop XP.
Me.
And today we got a great show, bro. We got a great show today.
I would
I'm
almost
excited.
say it's an incredible show.
An absolutely incredible show.
Incredible show.
With honorary guests. I mean, top of the top. I mean, the guests we have on tonight, our main guest tonight, his talents have spanned, I mean, a plethora of genres and mediums of entertainment, from television, video games, Blevins, novels, comic books, film. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. And I'm very excited to get into to dive in the weeds, as Mr. Steve Houston would say, and really figure out how all this came to be, because it's just for us, right? Growing up and watching these cartoons and reading these comics. I mean, holy smokes, man. Like, this stuff was insane.
It's our time. It's our time, Scala.
It's our time to shine.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, like the action figures, like the Super 7, the big Mega 8s, all that stuff is all coming out. Like it's for us. Like the circle is just coming back. They're bringing back all these old properties that were ours. I felt like I owned those from a kid, because kids today don't know what they were missing back then.
Oh yeah.
And it's absolutely exciting.
We had it great, man. We had it great.
We had it. It was awesome.
And for those that know, today we're going to be talking primarily on the Disney's Gargoyles. And to start this off, let's bring in two great friends of ours, friends of the show, friends of the channel. Blevins is actually, I think, official best friend in the whole wide world. Let's welcome from Gargoyles alumni, Miss Amanda Conner and Mr. Jimmy Palmiotti.
Hey guys.
Welcome.
He's my best male friend. Amanda's my best female friend.
Best male friend.
Yeah.
Well, he could be.
Take it. Sorry, Blevins.
That's fine. I'll take it.
All right.
He'll be whatever friend you want him to be.
Yes.
Exactly.
How are you guys doing?
Best friend over 300 pounds. Check. I'll take it.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, we're doing pretty good. We're pretty good. How about you guys?
We're doing great.
Man, I'm excited about tonight. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking to dive into this. I want to talk, obviously with yourselves. I mean, you guys worked on this IP, a while back when it first hit the comic book pages. So I think it'll be really cool. And now let's please welcome our honored guest.
Living Gargoyles.
Hi. How we doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. And I have to say, Greg, man, you're making waves right now. I'm seeing you everywhere. I'm seeing ads on every social media platform. I'm seeing streams. I'm seeing your face. And I'm like, that's the man. That is the man. This campaign, for those that don't know, and they will by tonight, is that, Dynamite partnered up, got the Gargoyles IP reprinting the 30th anniversary edition of the comic books. And I mean, it's gangbusters right now. I mean, we're talking over 4,100 backers. We're talking almost $650,000. I mean, that's incredible. Greg, how are you feeling? Are you feeling the love out there?
I always feel the love out there from Gargoyles fans. Gargoyles fans are the best. I just, the Kickstarter was set for 50 grand. Which was, to me at the time, a slightly scary number. The fact that we're at 644 grand and counting is very satisfying. Yeah. On the other hand, I would love to have more backers, even if all they're doing is pledging $1, because I want to be able to show the powers that be that this is not a niche property with a handful of very wealthy fans, but a something that reaches a lot of people. And I think the reason that the number of backers at 4,100 plus is great, and yet at the same time, I feel like that could be labeled as, niche, few thousand. And I'd love to get that number of backers up. And I really think that's about reaching more people. That's why I have been doing all these interviews and all this stuff, because I really want to find more ways to spread the word about the Kickstarter campaign, even within the last 4 days of it, which is where we are, because I think we can get that number of backers up. I'm not concerned about the money level, because we're so far past funding at this point. It's you know, it's fun. But I would love to get that backer number up, just to be able to prove
it shows you're making the rounds, and it's making. I mean, it's giving you the results that you're wanting. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever dealt with? Is this your first crowdfunding experience?
Second.
Is your second crowdfunding experience?
Yeah. First one went great. I did. I wrote a novel called Reign of the Ghosts, and we did an audio book of it that wasn't just one reader, but was 20 actors playing 30 roles, including Marina Sirtis and Brent Spiner and Ed Asner and others, old friends of mine, many of them from Gargoyles, some from Young Justice, some from Spider-Man. And we had a full original musical score by the composers for Young Justice and Spectacular Spider-Man. And we had full sound effects. It was like a 4-hour movie in your head. And at the time, and this was over a decade ago, but at the time it was the biggest audiobook Kickstarter ever. So that was my first foray into it. This is my second, and I'm very glad on this one to not be in charge of it, to just be a cheerleader and not have to actually be the person who's running it. Because my partner and I on that first one, it was brutal, keeping all that together. It was really hard.
Yeah. Do you know anything about that, Jimmy? Anything about running campaigns?
A little bit. It's definitely, and with those, Greg, the last one you did was that audio backers. People got like a file when they backed it, or they got physical media.
There were different levels. They could get an actual actual CDs back when we were doing it. CDs still mattered.
Well, I mean that means you had the mail thing, so that's where it gets crazy.
Right. And there was art rewards. Chris Jones did pinups.
Nice.
And we had a few other things. There were a bunch of and signed, lots of stuff to be signed. There were a lot of rewards that we did have to mail, even internationally. And there was even a reward that they could come have dinner with me and members of the cast. But they had that. We weren't paying for their travel. Right. But we would if they got to Los Angeles. And so we had a dinner with 2 or 3 backers and myself and 2 or 3 other actors who were in the audio play.
That's fun. That's fun. I mean, I've never done a dinner for my Kickstarters yet, but I know if I did, that Blevins would be right there, right? You'd be
absolutely.
You'd be back and grab a bite with me.
I'd reserve the table. You know what I'm saying?
It'd probably be like,
we would have a good time.
They're like, sir, I don't think they're coming. I was like, no, they're going to be here. It's my best friend. He's going to be here.
It'll be more like, it was just dinner, Blevins. You've been at our house for 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
So, but so the campaign's going on, and I see what you're talking about. You're at 4,136 backers. You want to see that number bigger, right? I do see a lot of publishers now that are using, crowdfunding, whether it's Kickstarter. Some have gone over to Zoop too as well, to get these books going. And it's almost like a premium, like the premium launch, right? Where you're gonna get the premium books, and then it goes off to retailers. With Dynamite in this reprint series here, is that what's going to happen? Is we're kind of doing the premium push right now, and then this will break off and go to retailers?
I know this stuff will go to retailers in some way, shape, or form, but they want to make sure that the people who are participating in the Kickstarter get premium value. So I don't know what that means long term. Like, it'll be more expensive if it goes to retailers. I also don't know if they're doing 4 versions of each volume. There are 3 volumes, and we can go through these now if you want. The first volume, which Amanda and Jimmy worked on, but I did not, is the Marvel stuff that was going on when the show was on the air. And the reason I didn't work on it is I was too busy actually making the show. And I was slated to take over, and I had written one script, and then the comic book got canceled, so that never happened. But I did reuse that script when we went to SLG in 2007, I want to say, it's 2008. And we have, and volume 2 is the SLG Gargoyles comics that I wrote all of. And were done by a number of terrific artists, including Nir Paneri and Gordon Purcell and Greg Guler and others. That's was another 12 issues we did for SLG. And then the third volume is Gargoyles Bad Guys, which was a spin-off. And I did I wrote 6 issues of that. And the artists were Corinne Charlebois and Chris Jones. We had, and so those are the 3 volumes, but each of these 3 volumes you can buy in 4 different ways, ranging from pretty reasonably priced trade paperbacks. And then there are hardcovers, and then there are signed hardcovers, and then there are deluxe editions, which are supersized and come in this faux iron treasure chest at a price point that I have to admit, when I first saw it, I thought, yeah, no one's going to pay for this. And then, like 60 people have signed up for it, which
it's amazing.
I find stunning. Which is not to say it doesn't make me happy. It makes me smile quite a bit, but I was kind of surprised, to say the least. So there are a lot of different price points, and these books are all out of print, all of them, the Marvel stuff and the SLG stuff. The Marvel stuff's been out of print for 30 years, and it was never collected. The SLG stuff, some of those individual issues were never printed because SLG lost the license about 2/3 of the way through the project. They were printed in a trade, but it was a digest size trade. It was small, so it wasn't even like you couldn't enjoy the full size of the art even, because those trades were small. And those trades from SLG, let alone the individual comics, those have been out of print for over a decade now. So, and if you try to find this stuff on like eBay or something like that, I'm not exaggerating, you'd be paying thousands of dollars for it. And that has always made me sad that this stuff that I'm very proud of has been out of circulation for over 10 years, and for some of it, nearly 30 years. And so I'm thrilled that this stuff will be coming out. And I'm, again, incredibly thrilled at how much support we've gotten financially from our 4,000 plus backers. It's fantastic. And yet I'm greedy enough that I still want that backer number to go up even more.
Yeah. Well, that's natural, I think, with campaigns. And I think especially for an IP that has such a rich history like this, because I know, you look at, there was like 3 main cartoons at that time, really, that were topping the chart. You had Gargoyles, you had Batman the Animated Series, actually 4, because you can add Spider-Man to that. But then you had X-Men the Animated Series. I mean, those were the 4 cartoons that we were waking up on Saturday morning and watching, or the first thing we did for the afternoon block when we got home from school. So the customers are out there, right? It's nostalgia, but it's fun seeing the new stories come out with this to bring it back, because as a guy in my 30s who grew up with that stuff, whenever it comes back out, I buy it. I want to continue the stories. I want to pick up, because the great thing is they were essentially made for kids my age when they came out. But now when they're being brought back in today's standards, they're kind of seems like they're now being made for the 30-year-old me, because I think they know the nostalgic market is there.
And you haven't grown up.
So I haven't grown up. No.
I think
I'll
never grow up.
At the time, even with the show, the main audience for those of us making the show back in the day. Myself and Frank Parr, who was my co-showrunner on Gargoyles, our story editors, Michael Reeves, Gary Sperling, Carrie Bates, and Bryn Chandler Reeves. We were very much setting out to make the kind of show we wanted to watch. And, you know, I was 30 back then. I'm 60 now, but I was 30 then. And so we had a target audience in those days. It was boys 6 to 11, but that was never enough for me. Again, I'm a greedy bastard, and I wanted girls 6 to 11, and I wanted kids, you know, 4 to 6, and I wanted tweens and teens and college students and adults to enjoy it. So we very consciously wrote the show on layers, so that, you know, for the youngest parts of our audience, there were big colorful monsters and explosions and humor and action and all sorts of stuff. And then, you know, there was other stuff for an older viewer to appreciate as well. And as I've been doing these comics, both the SLG stuff and the recent stuff that Dynamite's been publishing and that Amanda's been doing gorgeous covers for, that's the same goal, is, you know, let me write it on layers. There's stuff here that even a younger audience could still appreciate, but there's also stuff that's, you know, more sophisticated in there that someone who's grown up with the property won't have grown out of the property, in essence.
Yeah. And before we dive into the comics some more, since the cartoon came first, you know, one question I want to ask you is, how different was your original pitch for Gargoyles to the actual finished product that came to air?
Depends which pitch you're talking about. I pitched this show to Michael Eisner 3 times before he bought it. Michael Eisner was the chairman of the Walt Disney Company back then. And the first time we pitched it, the show was a comedy adventure show, very much in the vein of Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears, like consciously in the vein of Disney's
Nice.
Adventures of the Gummy Bears. It was, we loved Gummy Bears, and we felt it was this great original property that Disney put out that got no respect.
Nope.
And we knew why. There was brand confusion between Gummy Bears and Care Bears. And Gummy Bears had this great medieval backstory and great comic villains like Duke Igthorn and Toady, and was really rich and wonderful. And Care Bears was a show about hugs. And I like hugs as much as the next person, but I'm not sure I want to watch a 22-minute hug. And so on the one hand, you have Care Bears, which for us was this very saccharine kind of show. But we were the ones named after a candy. So, and both shows featured these small sort of teddy bear-esque multicolored bears. So the brand confusion was natural. So we set out very consciously when we first developed Gargoyles to create a show that had this rich medieval backstory, but we were going to do 2 major things to change it, to make it more edgy, because keep in mind, this was the 90s, and edgy, everything had to be edgy. Even kids programming needed to be edgy. And so the first thing we did is we'd have this medieval backstory, but instead of it being set in medieval times, we'd have them wake up in the 20th century. I don't know if you guys remember the 20th century. It was decades ago, but it was an interesting century.
That's when I got my CD player.
Right. I had an 8-track. But anyway, and then, so because we thought the modern New York setting would be edgier than the medieval sort of pastoral setting that Gummy Bears had. And then, of course, the main thing was, instead of cute little multicolored bears, huggable teddy bears, we had cute little multicolored gargoyles, creatures running around. Not too far removed from Gremlins or other, you know, properties like that in the day. And I pitched that to Eisner, and he passed. He wasn't interested. And so then my immediate boss, guy named Gary Kreisel, said, I still think there's something in this, you know, work on it some more. So I went back to the, I took the pitch and I showed it to a few select people at Disney, including a guy named Tad Stones, who had created Darkwing Duck. And Tad had recently seen an early version of Beauty and the Beast. And so he said, instead of having all these little gargoyles with their one female human friend, what if you had one big gargoyle and you did a Beauty and the Beast kind of thing? And the thing was, that was like a revelation to me, because I had worked at DC Comics. I was a superhero guy. The whole funny animal thing did not come naturally to me. Superheroes did. So Greg Guler and I created the character of Goliath, and then we took all the comedy development and put it through the prism of Goliath and came out the other end with the show that everyone's seen on television. And we loved this, and we had all these ideas. We had the pack and the mutates and all this stuff. And we did this huge pitch that went through all the things that we planned to do in the show. And we pitched that to Eisner, and he passed on it. He didn't like it. And, but my bosses still thought there was something there. So we went back to the drawing board for a third time, and we took a close look and we said, okay, what's wrong with this show? And we decided there's nothing wrong with the show. The problem is the goddamn pitch. It had everything in the kitchen sink, all things that we eventually did put in the show. But as a pitch, it was distracting as hell. There was just too much. It was overwhelming. It didn't seem to be about anything. It was like trying to pitch the entire DC universe instead of just pitching Superman in 1938, you know? And so we just cut things from the pitch, and we really, by this time, Beauty and the Beast had come out, which, as you may know, was a minor success for the Walt Disney Company back then. And so we really focused the pitch on the relationship between Goliath, the gargoyle, and Elisa Mazza, although she was Elisa Chavez back then. Elisa Chavez, the police detective. And once we made the pitch about the two of them, and we mentioned Hudson and Brooklyn, Lexington, and Broadway and Bronx and Xanatos and Dimona. They got a little mention each, but we really made the pitch about Goliath and Elisa. And once we did that, Michael bought it. And from that point on, Michael was a huge champion for the show. And what was great in those days, Michael being one of the last, if not the last, of the Hollywood moguls, is that if Michael Eisner at the Walt Disney Company said, we're making this show, everyone got on board or got out of our way, and we got to make the show we wanted to make. And then, like I said, we put the pack back in, we put the mutates back, we put all this stuff that we were going to do anyway. And it was sort of a superhero show without the trappings of a superhero show. No capes, no tights, you know, that kind of thing. But it's the mutt genre that superheroes are. You know, which includes sci-fi and fantasy and detective fiction and horror and the occult and mythology, and we threw in Arthurian legends, and I'm a big Shakespeare geek, so we threw in a shit ton of Shakespeare, and all that gave you the show that everyone hopefully has seen. And if not, why haven't you seen it? Go see it. What are you doing watching this? Go watch Gargoyles on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Go now.
But
like after you watch this.
Yeah, after.
Now, Blevins, you had some questions on the voice acting.
Oh man, I mean, first of all, talk about a Star Trek reunion, right? Like seemed like you had everybody. I do want to state, Gummy Bears had an absolutely banger of a theme song though, also, which was pretty incredible. But yeah, like, so you had like literally a who's who. I mean, when you look, you had Ed Asner, you had Jonathan Frakes, you ended up getting Marina Sirtis. When you were creating the characters later on down the road, like when you introduced, say, Cold Stone, was Cold Stone initially in your story? Like, was he initially a character you wanted to do, or was he somebody that was made so you could bring in Michael Dorn what about Angela? You know, the whole, you know, her being the daughter, was that something that was in the original?
So any character, case by case, I suppose. But the two you mentioned, no, we planned to do Cold Stone, and it was quite the reverse. In other words, we had Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis in our cast already. They had auditioned for the show and gotten the parts. In fact, Marina was literally the first person to walk through the door and audition for Elisa. And she wasn't right for Elisa, but we thought she might be perfect for Demona.
Right.
But we didn't have audition sides yet for Demona. So, and Marina never lets me forget this. We made her come back so that she could read for Demona. And she was the first person to read for Demona, and she just nailed it. And I think even Marina will tell you this, you know, Marina is much more like Demona than she is like Deanna Troi. Deanna Troi is like the nicest person in the galaxy. Demona is not. And Marina will tell you that she's somewhere in between, but probably closer to Demona than Deanna.
Well, I mean, you could hear her working with Xanatos. I mean, you can hear that relationship that was already pre-existing beforehand, which I think enhanced it to begin, you know, just out
and
the gate.
Jonathan likewise came in and auditioned for Xanatos, and you know, and won the part. This was not a situation where initially where we were like chasing Star Trek actors. They were just there. Now, once you've got those two in the booth week after week, right? And I remember this pretty clearly, specifically about Cold Stone. We were in the booth. We were taking 5 to give everyone a rest. And our voice director, Jamie Thompson, turned to me and said, "Okay, who do we need for next week? You know, are any new characters coming in next week?" And I was like, "Yeah, Cold Stone. He's Goliath's brother, so he needs big, deep chops like Keith David has. You know, we need someone who can play at a level with Keith David." And I'm looking through the glass at Marina and Jonathan. I'm like, well, what about Michael Dorn? I mean, and that was what started that whole having all these Star Trek people, was that, keep in mind, Next Generation was being made while we were doing the show. DS9 was being made while we were doing the show. Voyager started up before we were finished doing the show. And so, you know, you're looking at a couple Star Trek actors. And so this phenomenal repertory company just over the hill at Paramount, you know, was always on our mind. So we got Brent Spiner to do Puck, and we got LeVar Burton to play Anansi. And then, you know, we got Nichelle Nichols to play Elisa's mom, Diane Maza. And at some point it was like, can we get someone from every Star Trek series on the show just for fun? Because we were big Star Trek fans. And then at some point, I'll admit, it was like, well, this is sort of helpful from a publicity standpoint. Now, I would never cast someone who was wrong for a role just for the publicity value, but again, these were great actors and we had Jonathan and Marina there to tell LeVar and Dorn, and in particular, it's like, hey, you can come in, wear whatever you want, no makeup, no 4 hours in a makeup chair to look like a Klingon. And you don't even have to memorize the lines. You can have the script right in front of you. You know, it's a pretty sweet gig when you think about it. And so, you know, we were able to get a lot of people from the cast into the show. And it just became fun because, again, we were big time geeks anyway. So, you know, for us having that, and it meant that I got to go over to Paramount a couple times and see Jonathan on the set, and you know, that was, you know,
have some Earl Grey tea with Captain Picard.
Sticking with the being a geek, and obviously this is being a great story, and being able to work with these guys. How awesome was it having Frank Welker?
Frank is a joy. I mean, that wasn't the first show I worked with Frank on. He is phenomenally talented and amazing on so many levels, and so much history. The guy was in movies with Elvis Presley. I mean, it Frank is just so much fun. That was great. But we had a lot of great, voice actors on the show. Jeff Bennett was incredible. Bill Fagerbaki, who's probably better known now for being Patrick Starfish, but back then he was on Coach, and we were not his first show, but one of his first shows. We were one of Keith David's first animated series. We were definitely Sally Richardson's first animated series. And then you mentioned Angela, and the character of Angela we didn't have in the original pitch, but it was kind of a natural. We had the eggs, and the eggs were thought lost, but we knew we were bringing the eggs back. And I have to admit, because the show had been geared for boys 6 to 11, there was this push from Kenner, the toy company, to really focus on male characters. And I kind of regretted that I, on one level, though I love all the characters we have, that I let them win that fight. So when we decided to add more gargoyles, the first thing we needed to do was bring another female gargoyle into the mix, because the only female gargoyle we had was Demona. And I'm still in the Dynamite comics sort of working to correct the imbalance that we had back in the 90s, because of pressure from the toy company.
Yeah. Now, speaking of, you brought the comics up. So now you have a hit TV series that's now making a transition into the world of comics, where, Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti got to put their talents on. First, how did you have to give the approval to do that? And then I want to hear from Amanda and Jimmy about their first exposure to gargoyles and having to do that in the comic book form.
Disney, even before they owned Marvel, was a big company. So Disney made the deal with Marvel. I don't think I could have stopped it if I wanted to. I didn't want to, obviously, but I don't want to pretend like, oh yeah, I made that deal. I did not make that deal. That was some business affairs guy, I'm sure, who made that deal. But they sort of put me as Marvel's liaison with the editor on the book, and we talked about me writing for it, but I just was too busy. I mean, for season 2, we had to make season 1. We made 13 episodes in just under a year. Mm-hmm. Then for season 2, we have to make 52 episodes in just under a year, and there was no way I had time to write anything. But I did read everything, and then, as I went into post-production and things started to calm down on the second season, I said, okay, now I have time to do it if you want me to. And they said yes. And I wrote a script, and then the book got canceled.
So for Amanda and Jimmy, you've got this hit TV series on Disney, and now, how were you guys approached to work on the book for Marvel?
I was already working on some of the Disney covers, and also on Barbie. Yeah, Marvel had a licensing department, and I was finding that the constraints of doing the license stuff, especially stuff that was so that had style guides and everything that everybody was so strict about. I found out that it was really soul sucking, and Hildy Mesnick, the editor, had approached me about this new project, and she's like, well, it is for Disney, but it's for the Buena Vista department of Disney, and a man, Greg Weisman, is created this universe. It's gargoyles, and she said that Greg says you can draw it in your own style, just as long as people recognize the gargoyles. And I'm like, well, that sounds great. And so I jumped at the opportunity, and I didn't realize how much I was going to love it, you know, and I was watching the series and I'm like, this is amazing, you know? So yeah, I just, I was happy to be able to draw something that didn't involve a style guide and people telling me I was doing it wrong.
Yeah, all along, what I've been telling both on the Marvel stuff, the SLG stuff, and now on the Dynamite stuff is like, draw the way you want to draw. I said, I want to make sure Goliath is this tall relative to Lexington. I don't want Lexington to suddenly show up taller.
Right.
Gargoyles have a thumb and you know, 3 fingers. I don't want to suddenly see them with 4 fingers. But as long as the consistency's there, stylistically, do what you do. I don't need them to match Greg Guler's model sheets. If Greg draws an issue, which he did in the SLG era, if he draws a cover, then it'll look like Greg Guler. But I don't need Amanda stuff to look like Greg Guler's. Let Amanda stuff look like Amanda's stuff.
You have no idea how much a comic artist loves hearing that.
And Amanda, you know, looking at that first run of Gargoyle books, I mean, your Goliath, I loved him. You know, I loved it because I loved how he looked on TV. I think I just said I love like 4 times. He looked great on TV. And
I love that
when
you said that 4 times.
And I loved how he looked in the comic book. In the comic book, he actually looked a little more intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we were sort of happy that, you know, because I don't think comics is, you know, was as strictly regulated as the TV stuff. So we got a chance to go a little bit grittier than they would allow on TV. So we went with it. You know, we tried to get away with whatever we could, and we're still doing that.
Yeah. And then Jimmy, I mean, you got to do, you know, if you look at the credits on those books, I mean, you're there, like
Well,
on almost all issues with inking and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was Hildy called me up and just said, I got this cover by Joe Madureira. You want to come in and ink it? And I was like, what is it? And she goes, Gargoyles. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I went there and picked it up and knocked it out. And then she said she called me in again. She liked what I did. And she called me in again and says, yeah, I have this girl, Amanda Conner, who's going to draw the series, but I need somebody to work on the covers with her. And I went in and met Amanda. That was the first time I met her.
I think we met a little bit before that. I remember her telling me, how would you like Jimmy to ink you on the cover, on the covers? And I was like, yeah. So
I might have been drunk when we first met. I'm going to say that we were. I'm going to say we first met at Hildy's office for Gargoyles.
Probably, yeah, most likely, yeah.
But she gave me. She. I think at one point she asked me about interiors, and I said, I'm like so busy.
Yeah, you were inking everything.
And I was like, but I can do the covers over her. And I think I do remember when I went to the office. I got there before Amanda, and Hildy sat me down and said, she's married. Okay, so when she comes in here, you're gonna ink her covers, and that's it. She's married. I'm like, I didn't even meet her yet. I'm like, yeah, Hildy, like what the hell? And then she came in, I was like, oh yeah, yes, okay, and she's married. So I was like, I just put that stamp in my head, and wasn't married forever. That was good, but
off screen there was a scene where you just like, she will be mine.
I was like, you know, you live in New York, that shouldn't have to go that way. I was just like, okay, whatever. But
there have been a lot of Gargoyles couples, a lot of couples brought together by the Gargoyles show.
Yeah.
Our voice director and talent coordinator got married. They're now divorced, but they got together.
Yeah.
Our head of publicity for the show is still married to our music editor, and then I've been at Gargoyles conventions and watched the Xanatos get down on one knee and propose to an Elisa in cosplay. And
in
in
the armor or in the suit?
In the suit.
Oh.
Come on, it's a proposal, Blevins. It's
Hey,
got to be classy.
It's a cosplay.
I feel like with all
in
these
armor.
dating apps out there, maybe there's room for like a Gargoyles dating app.
You know, maybe it was
Yeah.
something to it, but
Yeah.
Maybe
well,
we can Kickstarter the Gargoyles dating app.
Yes.
there you
When you find a match, the gargoyle breaks, out of the stone.
go. It was the first time we got to see Amanda just be Amanda on a series.
Yeah.
And in the anchors, I think you had 2 anchors, right? Or is it
I think it was just Alberto.
Alberto?
It was
Okay, yeah.
Alberto Saichen, and he,
very stylized?
yeah, he's from Argentina,
Yeah.
and he was inking me on the interiors.
Yeah, and it was a fun, it was fun to do. It was one of those jobs I was like, is anybody, you can't tell, right? Anybody buying this until you do a convention a year or two later, and
and then you sign.
and then you sign a ton of them. Like the Joe Mad cover, right? Like that's an expensive book. The issue 1 is like we still sign them all the times because it's not only a hard book to find.
They're
but
crazy on eBay.
The people that love Gargoyles is 1 billion times bigger than the comics, what the comics sold. And I'm going to say this, Greg, because the Kickstarter is probably for every person that backed the Kickstarter, there's like 10,000 people that enjoy.
That's what I think. That's how I feel. That's why I want to see that. I want to prove that. I want objective proof for Disney.
Yeah,
that's true. That what you just said is true.
Yeah, I mean because I think we're also in a generation that doesn't really read that much. They're looking for 10-second clips and stuff. And I think comics are even a little tougher these days to get the people to read them. So I think, and then again, crowdfunding things and, you have to go on Kickstarter and put your credit card. It's just work for some people, and they just want it magically appear. We know that. They just want stuff to magically happen for them. So Disney has to understand on some level that the number you got is phenomenal. The amount of backers is amazing. And it's 1 out of every 10,000. So say times that by 10,000, that's pretty much your audience for the property.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to be what you want. And again, you have dynamite sales going on while the Kickstarter is on. But I guarantee you, even the people that buy the dynamite book, some of them, half of them, the week after this Kickstarter ends, they're going to go, I didn't know there was a Kickstarter. I would have backed it.
Believe me, I know.
Why didn't you guys tell me about it?
All the time.
All the time. I literally put ads every day, and then I wish I knew about this Kickstarter. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So that's the reality of it. Is it's never an even match from audience to people buying. It's never that, And this is a generation thing because when we're at shows, people talk about, I watched the original, and then we have young kids. Okay, maybe they're in their 20s and late teens, but they come in, they say, oh, I've been watching the Disney Channel, this great cartoon. I've seen that. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, so there's another there's
a whole new
generation enjoying it. So that's when Nikki came around to do the covers for him when he started. We said yes automatically, like, yeah, we'll do it. And during COVID, I learned how to color. And I'm using Procreate, so I got to color all the covers over Amanda, so that was kind of fun to do too.
Yeah. Your covers for Dynamite look awesome.
Yeah, we're trying to match it to the animated series more, and it's just been a lot of fun to work on.
I'll tell you what, Greg. If X-Men 97 does good, then we need to march on the doors of Disney and get Gargoyles back up, because that was just as popular of a cartoon series, if not, at least in my neck of the woods, if not more than the X-Men over time. Because it holds up. It holds up.
Back in the day, our ratings were better.
Mm-hmm.
Our ratings, we were the number 1 show in that category in our first season, which was the 94-95 season. Then in the 95-96 season came the onset of Power Rangers, which blew us out of the water. We were always number 2 to Power Rangers, but it still drives me crazy, I have to admit, but Power Rangers killed us. It was such a phenomenon on Fox when it came out. That show beat us every single day.
I never understood.
Never
understood it.
It's the robots.
I guess. Just
It's
never
the
no
robot.
appeal to
The
me.
big giant monsters, man. That's what it is. It's,
I would think a Gargoyles movie, like a CGI sort of like Incredibles, but you doing the Gargoyle would be like do pretty well.
Yeah,
I'm
over
thinking
that.
it's already has an audience. You know, I don't
I agree with you.
making new stuff, and it keeps failing. There's so many new things animation they make, and it keeps failing. I'm like, my God, the answer's right there. Just grab this, make a 2-hour feature, and then you can run as many series as you want after it, because the new audience will know what it's about, at least. You know, I'll talk to you Disney people tomorrow.
Was there ever any any chattering at all or anything about doing anything live action?
Yeah, in the back when we were making the show, Touchstone Pictures, which was Disney's sort of more adult motion picture arm in those days, put Gargoyles into development. And in those days at Disney, there were, for lack of a better term, fiefdoms. So my boss, Gary Kreisel, Gargoyles was under his fiefdom. So if the Touchstone executives wanted to do something with Gargoyles, they needed his permission. They couldn't just do it. And so Gary said, if you want permission to do that, you have to use Greg Weisman and Michael Reeves. Michael was our story editor and head writer of the first season and one of the story editors of season 2. And you have to use Greg and Michael. And so the Touchstone executive used us, and we wrote Treatment, and we rewrote it. And then at some point, it became clear to me that what they wanted to make wasn't a movie of the show. They wanted to just use the title and do whatever the hell they wanted with it. So I said, look, more power to you. I don't own this. You guys own this. So I'll step off this because I don't want to make something that's going to make me feel sad. And so Michael kept going for a little bit, but then Gary, our boss, left Disney. And once he left Disney, Michael and I immediately got fired off the picture because they didn't want to use some piddly cartoon guys. They wanted to use big live action writers, and so they I was in theory still a producer on the movie, which meant literally nothing. I mean, I couldn't even get copies of the scripts that they were turning out. Though I would have gotten some money if they had made it. So I wasn't against the project, but they went through, I'm not exaggerating, 10 writers on that project until a new person took over Touchstone, at which point the new person wasn't interested in making it and the project just went away.
So it's amazing in that business. Comics is the same thing. I can write a whole comic series, 120 issues of something, and then as soon as they want to develop it for animation or a film, they're like, yeah, we don't need you. You don't really know what we want. It's just so the first thing they want to do is dismiss anybody that's actually created the damn thing or has worked on it. So it's nice to see that it's in every business pretty much at this point.
Yeah, I'm sure it's literally in every business. You know?
So what's the future for Gargoyles? Since you've been working on that now.
Well, I mean, for me right now, I'm really happy doing these comics for Dynamite. I'm serious. I mean, I just love being playing in this universe again. I truly love these characters. They're like my third child. The Gargoyles universe is like my third child, and
you do have 2 children?
I do, yeah. They're children in the sense that
I don't want to hear you had 3 children.
No, they're
in the background sharpening a knife.
They're my kids are in their mid to late 20s, so they're not really kids anymore. But yeah, I mean, my daughter, when she was before my son was born, my daughter did a voice on Gargoyles. She played Alexander Xanatos, Xanatos and Fox's son, and she had one line, which was just to say doggy, and she was barely talking, but she said doggy all the time. I mean, not just when she'd see a dog, she was constantly saying doggy. So we thought it'd be fun to put her in front of the microphone, let her say doggy. We just needed her to say it twice. And she'd point it at first Bronx and say doggy, and then she'd point at Lexington and say doggy. And like I said, she said doggy all the time. And we put her in front of the mic on her mom's lap. We put her in front of the microphone, and she just said nothing. We couldn't get her to say it. Could not get her to say it. Finally, we went into the green room and found a magazine with a picture of a dog, and we showed it to her, and she said doggy once, and we just needed her to say it one more time. We could not get her to say it a second time. So we just reprinted the first time twice. But yeah, there's an episode of Gargoyles that my daughter illegally, because she wasn't union and we had no social workers there, illegally said the word doggy once, and we used it twice. And now she's 29, married, an adult. She teaches,
Has an unbeknownst criminal background.
Teacher. Yeah, exactly.
Does she have a dog at least?
They want a dog, but they live in a small apartment with her and her husband right now. And I said today, today we were talking about this, and she said, we want the biggest dog ever. And I'm like Clifford? And she's like, yes, I want Clifford, the big red dog. And so she's working towards living somewhere where she's working towards affording to be able to live somewhere where she can afford to get Clifford, the big red dog.
As we head into the close of this interview, Greg, I just want to open it up for Blevins. Let him have a little fan moment if he has any other questions for you.
Well, first of all, man, you absolutely created some of the greatest cartoons and shows that I've grown up with, and I love them to death. One, which I've been dying to talk about, is Roughnecks to Starship Troopers Chronicles. Man, so that was all CGI, and it was a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people don't know this story was out there. Everybody knows Starship Troopers from the Paul Verhoeven, movie and stuff, but they didn't know that that Diz was a guy. Unless you read the book, you wouldn't have known all that. But I mean, the story in CGI was, it was dark. It was a dark story, and they did it in sections.
Ended up being darker than we had planned for it to be.
Was that
because they ran out of money, and so the last 3 episodes didn't get made, which is the 3 episodes where
they go to
Earth wins the war. So it ends on the down point when Earth looks like it's going to lose, and that became the end of the series. And we were like, "You've got to be kidding me! How can you end it like this?" And they're like, "There's no money to make the last 3 episodes." We've had this entire 40 episode arc leading to the Roughnecks winning the war, and you're gonna leave it with them having lost, and they're like, "Yep."
I watched that. Now it's flashback. I remember because it was Mainframe was doing the animation on it.
Some of it, yeah. Foundation did some, Mainframe did some.
Yeah.
When I was working at Sony on Starship Troopers and Max Steel, we bankrupted at least 3 different CGI studios.
Well, one of the things that I thought was amazing about that story was, in the TV show or in the movie, you have Carmen, which was Denise Richards' character, and then the boyfriend that she had at the time, and the brain bug come out and stabbed him in his head. He's like the guy that got by the brain bug. Well, he actually got bit during the series and transformed into one of the aliens, and I thought that was so incredible because that was
I didn't work on any of those episodes. I did 2 out of the 40. I story edited 2 5 episodes arcs, one on the Jungle Planet, and then what was supposed to be the final arc. And again, only 2 of my 5 episodes got made. We did all the scripts, we recorded all the voices. And one time, just because I was pissed off, I went to a convention and we cast fans. So we did the last 3 episodes as a radio play at a convention.
That's awesome.
Just because I'm like, no one ever saw how the war turned out. I want someone to know.
Recorded? Like, do you still have it?
The people in Tucson did.
Do you have it recorded, like to share?
No,
Like,
I mean, no one recorded. Oh, I'm sure I have the voice recordings. I'm not sure.
How about the scripts?
The scripts I definitely have.
Boy,
But we have those scripts. No one recorded the live thing with just,
God, maybe there should be a Kickstarter for the last of the scripts.
I know. Publish the scripts and the series.
I think if the Gargoyles hits 1 million, it could be a digital, like a script. You can get a stretch goal.
Well,
It's $1 million.
It's not a Disney Dynamite thing. I don't know that this is a good one for that.
That's true. That's true.
Well, on top of,
And I'm not sure Sony would be big on the idea of me letting those scripts go. But
You can always ask
I don't
after.
know.
You can ask after.
yeah, it's always good to
They
ask.
leaked.
You mean ask for forgiveness?
Yeah,
Ask for forgiveness, yeah.
Well,
Whoops.
on top of,
I tripped and the scripts fell on the internet.
Some kid found one.
I don't know how that happened. It was crazy.
Yeah.
On top of that show, I mean, we can't really talk about amazing cartoons without bringing up Young Justice. I mean, Young Justice, absolutely phenomenal. Probably, look, I love Batman the Animated Series. I think that it is up there because I grew up with it. Same with Batman Beyond and Terry McGinnis. But I mean, if you're going to go to a third, I mean, it has to be Young Justice. Young Justice had some of the smartest writing to it, some of the best action, and I mean, even the comic book that got done with Christopher Jones, that tied into the story. Like they thought that there was never going to be a season 3, there was never going to be a season 4 or season 5 after after COVID and stuff hit. And then luckily we were able to get all those seasons after the fact. But I mean, like what were you thinking when did they just give you carte blanche when it came to Young Justice, or was that, because I mean, that was really dark as well. I mean, you got clones and babies and I mean, like, I mean, it was pretty incredible.
Originally, I had just finished doing Spectacular Spider-Man for Sony, and we'd done 2 seasons and then had been sort of caught in a corporate catch-22, which was that Marvel, again, this is before Disney had bought Marvel. Marvel had recovered the rights to do Spider-Man as animated series, but Sony owned the rights specifically for the Spectacular version of it. And so the only way Marvel could make more episodes of Spectacular, even though that show was a big hit at the time, was if they paid Sony to do Spider-Man. And there was no way Marvel was going to pay Sony to do Spider-Man. So we were dead after 2 seasons, even though we were a big hit.
And they
so
were
I was
Ultimate Spider-Man, right?
Right. I mean, they did their own thing, and I intentionally didn't watch it because there was like no good news there for me.
Yeah.
If it was bad, I'd be frustrated. If it was good, I'd be jealous. So I just didn't watch it. I have no opinion on it. It may have been terrific. I have no idea. I just didn't watch it.
It was terrible.
It was awful.
Horrible.
But anyway, I was free. So Sam Register, who was and is the head of Warner Brothers Animation, brought me in and partnered me with Brandon Vietti, who I'd worked with a little bit before, but didn't know all that well at the time. Now we're very close, and he assigned us to work on Green Lantern. And then this was in anticipation of the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie, and it got delayed. So he's like, okay, we were really excited about doing Green Lantern. We developed a version of it. for about 3 weeks before he said, no, stop. We don't need Green Lantern now for another year. So I want you to work on Space Ghost. And we were really excited to do Space Ghost. They hadn't done anything with Space Ghost except Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which is a lot of fun, but we wanted to actually do, action Space Ghost, and we were going to bring the Herculoids into it, and all sorts of
Hanna-Barbera,
all those great Hanna-Barbera heroes, and we worked on that for about 3 weeks when he said, stop, Consumer Products doesn't know what to do with Space Ghost, so we want you to work on Young Justice. At which point Brandon and I both said, no, we don't want to do Young Justice, because they just finished 2 fantastic series, Teen Titans and Justice League Unlimited. And they were both great, very different tonally and stylistically, but they were both great shows. And we were like, what would we do? The fans will kill us. They'll be like, don't make this thing, make more Teen Titans episodes, or make more, Justice League Unlimited. Why are you doing this piece of crap? And Sam was like, well, use the Young Justice title because that tested well or something. I can't remember. But you don't have to follow the 90s Young Justice comics. Do whatever you want with it. And so Brandon came up with the idea of making it not a superhero show, but a spy show with superheroes and teenagers. So it was a spy show first, a show about teenagers second, and a show about superheroes a pretty distant third in our minds. And the teens would be the proteges of various members of the Justice League, and they would make up the Justice League's covert op team. And we began to explore different facets of the DC universe, and we sort of got permission to make it an entire DC universe adaptation, as opposed to adapting one comic or another comic. We were going to adapt the entire DC universe. I put together a list of all the DC teen heroes. It probably had, 75, 100 names on the list, including, I remember this, 3 blonde female teenage archers, because of course just having 2 blonde female teenage archers in your universe isn't enough.
No.
And so we slowly whittled down who we would have as our leads, at least our initial leads, and we just went to town. And we had a lot of freedom, and then weird restrictions would come up from legal or something or other. The first season, there were at the beginning, there were 4 characters that we were absolutely forbidden from using. And I never knew why, but it was the Donna Troy version of Wonder Girl, the Cassie Sandsmark version of Wonder Girl,
The Cassie Sandsmark was Artemis, right?
No.
Artemis
Croc was Artemis. The Ted Cord version of Blue Beetle and Darkseid. And then halfway through the season, they said, oh, you can use them. But it was too late. I mean, we hinted at Darkseid, but we couldn't. It was too late. We were too far along to switch. But we got Cassie into season 2, and we got our version of Donna, who's called Troya, into season 3 and 4, and began bringing Darkseid in season 2 and 3 and 4, and we eventually even got a little bit of Ted Cord. But by the time so we got all that in, and every once in a while they'd hit us with some rule. Between season 2 and season 3, for example, you can't use the word Marvel. He can't be Captain Marvel. He has to be Shazam. And this was like, I don't know how that works. He can't even say his own name. So it became this thing where every once in a while there'd be some restriction, but generally speaking, yeah, they gave us free reign across the whole DC universe, which was just a joy.
One more thing, because I want to bring your campaign back up before we go so we can encourage everyone to check that out. And everyone that's watching this, look in the description below. The link for this campaign will be there. There's 4 days left currently as of Thursday, February 8th, and it will be ending on Monday, February 12th by 11:59 p.m. Eastern time if you're on that portion of the country. But you also are doing some work for Marvel too, right? With Humberto Ramos?
Yeah, I'm writing the Spectacular Spider-Men, plural, with Peter and Miles together. Every Wednesday they go for coffee at the Coffee Bean on the Empire State University campus, which is where Peter's alma mater, and Miles is seriously thinking about applying there. And so, Peter and Miles each have their own books, and from Thursday to Tuesday they're in their own books, but on Wednesdays they're in mine having coffee. And then the plan Peter has is like, hey, let's just hang out. We'll have coffee. No spider stuff at all. We're just going to be two friends having coffee. And I know this will come as a shock to you, but things go wrong, and so they have to suit up. And so surprisingly, it ends up not just being 22 pages of Peter and Miles having coffee, but it does. It's a lot of fun. One of the things I want to do with the book, Peter has been sort of a mentor to Miles for about 20 years, which is a neat trick since Miles is only 16. And I've had many mentors, Dick Giordano, I mentioned Gary Kreisel, Tad Stones, over the years. And I've also tried to mentor people. Now that I'm old, I've tried to be a good mentor to people, but the goal is not to maintain the relationship as mentor and protege. The goal is, over time, you want to just become friends with these people. And so what I thought we'd try to do with this book is move them beyond the mentor-protege relationship and evolve them into the beginnings of an actual, just more equal friendship. And that's what we're striving to do with this book. And I'm really happy. I'm literally in the middle of writing issue 5 now. But I've seen the art for the first 3 issues, and Umberto's just knocking it out of the park. Every page is like a little mini story, and it's so fantastic that even if I wrote a shopping list, the book would still be worth buying because Umberto's art is so fantastic.
He's great.
Awesome. Yeah,
He's a great guy too.
Yeah, he's awesome. I love Humberto. And this book comes out, is it March 6th? Is it still on target for that?
I don't. We're on target. I don't remember what the release date is, but I know it's in March. It's next month.
Yeah, I believe I read it was March 6th. But again, Greg, Amanda, Jimmy, I want to, thank you guys for all coming on, talking gargoyles with us. And again, everyone, please, there's 4 days left on the campaign. Let's get those backers up. Let's show Disney how much we love this IP. We love gargoyles. We love everything about it. The link is below in the description. And check it out. Give it a back. Again, all different levels.
There's a couple of Amanda commissions left, too.
Nice.
If somebody's commission level, I think there's a couple more left. So I just want to mention that.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, Greg, Jimmy, Amanda, Mr. Blevins, Dr. Blevins, thanks again for tuning in. And it was great chatting with you and, kind of getting to know a bit about your working career. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Peace.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you soon.